So we do have some problems here in the United States. Some of those problems have to do with prices being too expensive. Others have to do with an upcoming election where some Democrats and Republicans are asking for the removal of President Biden. Some Democrats are saying that he needs to step down. Republicans are saying that they are going to win this upcoming election handedly. It will be easy and it will be a blowout. I'm going to address that. We'll talk about what President Biden said last night at a speech, which was supposed to be unscripted. However, President Biden was giving a list. This list gave him names of people to call on. And even in this speech, and you may see a little bit of this, but it looked like President Biden, when he was asked questions, somebody was behind the teleprompter writing his responses, because all of a sudden he would go, he'd look up, he'd look over to his teleprompter, and all of a sudden, just a bright idea came into his head, and he would speak. Now, we'll address this in just a moment, but all I ask is one thing. It takes 2 seconds. Go ahead, hit that like button if you enjoy these daily updates, and now, let's begin. So let's first start off with one of the problems. Look at this. It says U.S. consumer sentiment falls to 8-month low on high prices. It says short and long-term inflation views declined in early July. And the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index drops to 66. So here's what it's done in the past. Look at this. Okay, look at this chart. Right here is the Consumer Sentiment Index. You can see it was up here about 79, 78, 79. And this was in March. And then now it's down here at 66. It's dropping. Okay? But look at this. As inflation is dropping as well, we're at 2.9%. And again, this is where the consumer sentiment is falling. Now, one of the reasons why the consumer sentiment is falling is because even though inflation is coming down, this isn't deflation. Prices aren't dropping. They're just not going up as quickly. It's a disinflation that we're seeing. Again, we need to be well aware of both of those things because it's not just one or the other. Now, this is the report that came out yesterday that prices fell in June. This is the first time since the start of the pandemic. Well, all the different media outlets, all the different news channels I've been watching and reading and listening to, they're all saying the same things. Prices are falling. Prices aren't coming down. That's the big issue. But if you listen to what many people are saying, you listen to what President Biden said just last night, that the economy's going strong. It's doing well. Economists are saying he's doing an incredible job, and prices are dropping. It's becoming more affordable to live in the United States now. No, it's not. And this is part of the problem, is that we are being fed these different lies. Now, I'm going to show you this, okay? Because one of the things that we've talked about here on the channel over the past year or so is Bidenomics. Is it working? Well, Bidenomics is not technically working. Is Bidenomics improving what we have gone through over the past couple years? Yeah. But Biden was also in charge 2 years ago. And so for us to come out and say, oh, Bidenomics is working, this is what we need. Well, it's not really working. So let's read this. It's from the Associated Press. President Biden insisted that he's got to finish the job. Okay? It says, it's a delicate dance between the president and vice president, with many Democrats openly pining for Harris to replace Biden on the ticket. Biden didn't acknowledge that tension, but only brought Harris up in response to pointed questions about whether he believed she had the capability to replace him. Biden said, I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. And says Biden said, citing Harris, his resume from prosecutor to the U.S. Senate. One of the things that President Biden mentioned is he said Vice President Trump. He said he would not have picked her if he didn't think she was qualified to be president. He called Vice President Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. This wasn't the first time he mixed up names. Okay, when he was talking to at the NATO summit, and he was talking about President Zelensky from Ukraine, he called him President Putin. Quickly, he said, obviously I mixed that up. We're fighting Putin. That's who we're doing. That's who we're fighting. We're fighting Putin. Again, it wasn't the first time. He's mixed up many names before. Now, I want to read this to you, though. It says, but in response to a later question, he acknowledged he'd moved on from his 2020 campaign promise to be a bridge to a new generation of Democrats. It says, what changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited. He said it without a word about his vice president. Repeatedly, he said, I've got to finish this job. Now, here's where things get very interesting. Said the press conference ended with Biden being asked directly whether he'd step down for Harris if he saw polling showing she had a better chance of beating Trump. President Biden says, no, unless they come back and said there's no way you can win. Then he responded saying, no polls saying that. Well, let's listen to that, because that is something that we need to listen to. Here you go.
That you just asked me.
Yes. You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that. Okay. Thank you.
This ends tonight.
Now, here's what I think is interesting. According to multiple reports this morning, again, that statement that he gave, that speech that he gave was just last night. Okay? But what I think is interesting is that we are now getting reports that there are multiple media outlets that are going to run new polls. And here's what they're going to be polling on. Do you support Donald Trump? Do you support President Biden? Do you support Vice President Kamala Harris? Because he says, he was just asked if there is data that says that you can't win. Are you gonna bow out? He says no, because there's no polls that are saying that. Well, guess what? Now it sounds like Democrats are wanting to go and make the polls, and not necessarily make the polls say exactly what they want, but go and conduct these polls to show President Biden that, yeah, you are not going to win, but the best person that is available might not be you. And if that's the case, they will ask him to drop out. We've been getting a lot more reports just recently that more Democrats are asking for this. Okay, look at this. It says Biden campaign digs in as Democrats brace for more calls on president to drop out. In the key points, it says President Joe Biden will be in Detroit to deliver a campaign speech a day after he committed to remaining in the 2024 presidential election race. Again, this article is from today. It says 3 more Democrats called on Biden to quit the race against former President Donald Trump on the heels of a press conference in Washington on Thursday night. That's Representative James Clyburn of South Carolina, a Biden ally, suggested there is plenty of time for Biden to change his mind before the Democratic National Convention in August. Again, we only have like 116 days left before the next election. So they have to do something quickly. So we'll see what's going to happen. But again, this is just another big problem, is that we have no clue who Democrats are going to be voting for. Because as of right now, they have no clue which Democrat's going to be on the ticket. So we'll see what happens moving forward, but that is what we know as of today. So again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.